Can you pass the Florida real estate exam? Short of actually taking the exam, we're going to do the next best thing today, which is we're going to be going directly into the question simulator that's part of the Pass First Try bundle. And this is really the closest thing you can get to taking the actual state exam. And why would you want to do this rather than just going to take the state exam and see how you do? Well, you could get unlimited access to this for 12 months instead of paying per attempt at the state exam. And on top of that, you want to maintain the momentum. You want to maintain the confidence. You want to go into this in stride, not trying to climb up a cliff. And that's what these tools are designed to do, to help prepare you. But it's important that you use them correctly. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through practice questions, but you're going to see in the time that we could go through many more practice questions just how much key detail and information you're going to be able to pull out from each of these questions and where to go in the rest of the Pass First Try exam prep tools if you do need further elaboration on certain details, a better understanding on the contract section or the property rights or mortgage terms or whatever it may be. You can find all of that more, including the how-to with the secrets of the exam. But let's get right into the question simulator. So this is available right in the TSRE app. So we have an app that's available for any Google Android device, as well as any iPhone, any Apple device. You can even do it on the silicone MacBooks. You can download the app, or you can just log in the old-fashioned way on the website. But the app is pretty cool because it does have an offline mode, which will allow you to access the question simulator even if you're off the grid somewhere and you've got no internet connection, whatever it may be. You just download it one time and it saves in the app. Same thing with the exam cram videos, the audio review, and all of the tools in the exam prep Pass First Try strategy. So what we're doing here in the simulators, we're going to the random 100 question practice exam. And so when we pull this up, it's designed to simulate the actual state exam. And the way that it does that is essentially you're getting a certain amount of questions from every single unit. For example, the brokerage operations, that's 12%, so you'll get 12 questions from that. The contract chapter, that's another 12%, you'll get 12 questions from that. The property rights, that's about 8%, you'll get 8 questions from that. And all of this matching the FREC syllabus to give you, again, as close to the actual state exam as you can. And it even does have a timer in here as well. So you'll see that counting down 3.5 hours, just like you'd have on the state exam. Unless you do have 3 trial questions, you could get that on the state exam where you'll have an extra 15 minutes. And then you have 3 extra questions that you don't know whether or not they count for you or against you, or if they're just a sample question that they're testing out for future exams. Because they do that periodically. Very often you'll have 103 questions. But we talk about that more specifically in the secrets of the exam. That's another tool in the exam prep tools that goes more into understanding this exam as a whole, how to study for it, how to take advantage of the system as much as you can, because it is a computer-based exam that you use to take this. And there's all kinds of little features, mark for review, skipping questions, how to take good notes to be able to easily reference back in case one question gives away the answer to another. So a lot of strategies like that. It's almost 3 hours of content in the secrets of the exam, and it's all about how to, again, make yourself as test ready as possible, which is the icing on the exam content cake. And so this is a great place to begin with the question simulator, or just doing the questions here live with us today, because what we're going to be doing is looking specifically at these. And let's load this up a little bit. Can we blow this up bigger? No, I think we're stuck in this size for right now. That's okay. We'll look on that for the next episode. Subscribe to the channel to make sure that you're not missing out on any of this exam prep information whenever it is that we go live to help you not just pass the exam, but advance your career. So first question, let's get right into studying here. The fair housing poster is available from who? The fair housing poster is available from who? So we've got the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the Florida Real Estate Commission, and the Division of Real Estate. Now, these are all things that you would have learned about in your pre-licensing course. These three, however, are all going to be state level type of entities. And the Fair Housing Act, specifically the HUD poster, that's a federal program. And so the only one on here that is federal is the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The DBPR, this is who you do your license application with. The Florida Real Estate Commission is ultimately who has the final authority when it comes to real estate in Florida. And the Division of Real Estate is the entity within the DBPR that deals specifically with real estate. And so, again, these are all state-level entities, and that's a federal entity. Now, this is one thing, just again, to give one more, I don't want to call it a sales pitch, but benefit of our question simulator here, because we used to just resell what was a nationwide publisher. They made it specifically for Florida, so they say. But the thing that, just from a studying strategy, and this is one of the differences you will see comparing these questions to the state exam, is we don't like to give you made-up wrong information. We want to give you only correct information, and that's what this question does here, because any one of these options you choose are all in your course, and these are all important entities to know. As a matter of fact, the least important entity out of all these is probably the answer for this one, because we do talk more about the DBPR, the FREC, as well as the Division of Real Estate, because technically whenever we're talking about the DBPR, when we're talking about the specific activities that are related to real estate, that's the Division of Real Estate. The DBPR is just the larger entity that houses the Division of Real Estate. And then the FREC is its own separate entity. And as you can tell, there's a lot more explanation that goes in this, little tricks and patterns that I like to point out, and that's what we do in the exam cram videos, and that's what this workbook goes along with right here. So that Pass First Try bundle, you can get all of this for just $47 per month. With TSRE Plus, it's our monthly program. The first month includes your workbook shipped to your door anywhere in the continental United States for free, and you can always pay to upgrade to expedited shipping, but especially if you're in Florida, it comes really quick, even with the free shipping. And so this workbook is very useful. Again, you get it with TSRE Plus with the first month, and there's no commitment. Cancel anytime. $47 per month to access all of the exam prep, including the question simulator. Or you could purchase all the exam prep tools together with 12 months access for $197 at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. If you have any questions about any of that, reach out to us, 813-333-2676. But definitely take advantage of that. Try that out for just the month. I mean, this workbook alone is worth more than the first month, so that is why I would say to do it. But yeah, tampaschoolofrealestate.com. PassFirstTry.com specifically, you can go directly to the page that has the details on the strategy, the tools, and how to use it. So next question here. A buyer purchased a home for $220,000 with a down payment of $20,000. What is the loan-to-value ratio? So we've got some math here now. And what I really like about this, and this is another thing we do point out specifically in the exam cram videos, there's a lot of visual in there. Your formula is right in front of you in the question. Loan-to-value ratio, the formula is loan divided by value. Loan-to-value means loan divided by value. So we have a purchase price of $220,000, so that's our value. But it doesn't say our loan amount specifically. It does say the down payment of $20,000, but we're not looking for the down payment percentage. We're looking for the loan-to-value ratio. So what we need to divide this by is $220,000 minus $20,000, so $200,000. And we'll divide that out, $200,000 divided by $220,000. Now, you are allowed to use a basic four-function calculator, such as this right here, and you can just punch that right in. You can even use the shortcut if you're confident of 200 divided by 220 to get 90%. So let's go ahead and pick 90% there. Oh, we got to clear off my writing. This smartboard thing adds an extra layer on here. But yeah, so 90%. Key thing, though, is 200,000 divided by 220,000. Failure of the broker to post the fair housing poster results in which of the following? We've got A, a charge in discrimination, B, a division of real estate violation, C, evidence of discrimination in the event of discrimination complaint is made against the broker, and D, a Florida Real Estate Commission rules violation. And so a lot of times you might be having to do a true or false on these questions. And no, your exam questions are not touchscreen. You can't, and maybe they are touchscreen. I don't know. It's been a while since I've taken this, but I'm pretty sure they're just old-fashioned screens they have at the testing center. And you're just using the mouse to click on it. Very similar how you might be using this on a computer. But you are provided scratch paper where you could write out question number 2. True or false, A, B, C, D, and go through these. And try to use that process of elimination whenever the answer doesn't jump right off the screen at you. Because a lot of times, the answers are not going to just jump off the screen at you. They're going to not always be the best answer in the world, but they might be the best answer out of the choices that you're given, or the one that you recall the most at least. And there is also one strategy here. Worst case scenario, you don't want to have to use this, but it would work in this situation, so I'll share it with you here. But option A, a charge of discrimination. I'm going to, as a real estate instructor teaching this course, I'll say that's not a real thing as it relates to this course. Is that a real thing in the real world? I don't know. But it's not in the course, I can assure you that much. Not in the course, not your answer. So I'm going to say that's not a case. And it also sounds like a charge of, well, what does that mean? A charge? Are we talking about a felony? Are we talking about a misdemeanor? What is it sounds like a made-up thing, and that's because it is a made-up thing. Trust your gut. And remember, if you don't remember it from the course, it's not your answer. A lot of times people second-guess themselves and they think, oh, I don't remember that. That must be it. No, because maybe there is a better answer, and there is. We've got a division of real estate violation. So the division of real estate, nor do the Florida Real Estate Commission, really, they're not the ones that are administering fair housing, just as we talked about before. So this comes from a chapter that's 4%. So we've in our short time here got 2 of those questions out of the 4 that are related to fair housing. And that's really the main act. There's quite a few other things that are covered in that same chapter that covers fair housing, but fair housing is the majority of that 4% in that chapter right there. Now we're left with option C, which if you weren't feeling C for sure, one thing that always makes me feel more confident when I choose the longest answer is because this is a standardized exam. That longest answer is almost, I shouldn't say almost always, because if you rely on this, it's more often than not, so maybe 51% of the time, 60% of the time, not enough to pass the exam. But a lot of times when you're unsure, I find that if it's not the longest, it's one of the longer answers just because it explains more. This question isn't explaining a whole lot, and neither do any of these answer choices except for option C. And option C really just says it's just evidence of discrimination. It doesn't mean it's a charge of discrimination, because that poster, it's mandatory in the sense that you're going to get in trouble if you do discriminate and you don't have that poster, because it is evidence against you. Now, that means you should always have a poster. As a broker, you should always have that poster up, just to ensure that everybody is always able to see that and be on the same page that, oh yeah, we don't discriminate based on these things. And that is almost verbatim from the actual laws and from the textbook. So that is one of the things. If you are one of our pre-licensing students here from the Tampa School of Real Estate, the textbook that we use, it's very long. It's 500 pages versus the workbook is only about 100 pages or so. So this is 20% of the length. But this has a lot of really good details, and a lot of times it does have the words verbatim, which we do try to have the condensed verbatim in here, because we find when it's simpler, when it's shorter, it's easier to remember. And evidence of is the key thing to remember about failure to having that fair housing poster up. And again, the way it's worded right here, which is a lot of the way it is on the state exam as well, is they'll choose the wording directly out of the statutes, directly out of whatever laws or administrative documents that are out there chartering these entities and these rules and regulations. So question number 3 here. The Florida Real Estate Commission is obligated. No, this is number 4. The Florida Real Estate Commission is obligated to report any knowledge of criminal violations of Chapter 475 Florida statutes to the So to give some clarification on this here, the Florida Real Estate Commission, this is another important thing to remember for your exam, they do not have the ability to impose criminal penalties. They don't handle criminal matters, they handle administrative matters. So they can suspend, revoke your license, charge you fines, citations, whatever that may be. But when it comes to criminal violations of Florida statutes, they are not the party that handles that. No one at the DBPR is, because the DBPR is an administrative branch of government, and part of the DBPR, again, is the Division of Real Estate. You see how these answers can be easily eliminated here the more it is that you know all of these different things. And again, that is one of the things that is great about our question simulators. We try to put good information in here, but there's still wrong answers, and you don't want to associate these wrong answers with these questions, because that's not the way to go about studying. This is really just designed to test you, to see if you're really confident of this. Can you speak to this the way that I'm able to speak to all this right here? Or are you kind of scratching your head saying, I'm not really sure? Because if that's the case, then go in and watch the exam cram videos for that unit. Listen to the audio review for that unit. Again, $47 a month with TSRE Plus, you could have all these exam prep tools. So state attorney having jurisdiction, that is your best answer, and I'm going to say is the correct answer. This one's close because the state attorney basically is just the highest level of the local law enforcement, the state attorney having jurisdiction. But yeah, that's who it goes to. It gets referred directly to the state attorney's office, and then they decide whether or not they want to press criminal charges against that person based on the information, or opening up an investigation, or whatever it may be. Which method of legal description uses the point of beginning? So one of these on here is not a method of legal description. And that one that is not a method of legal description is the plat map. The plat map is not a method of legal description. So that leaves us with three options. If you could remember that plat maps are not a method of legal description. As a matter of fact, they're actually used with the lot and block method. So plat map is something that comes up. I want to say it's in 4 different chapters in your course. You see plat map. And one of those things is that you need a plat map to use the lot and block method. So the lot and block method uses a plat map, but it doesn't use a point of beginning. The government survey system has a place where the principal meridian and baseline intersect, and that happens to be in Tallahassee in Florida, but that's not called the point of beginning. And other states have actual multiple sets of principal meridians and baselines, but Florida, we just have the one in Tallahassee. The one that uses point of beginning is the meets and bounds, because meets and bounds says you go so far in a certain direction. You go north 100 feet, east 100 feet, south 100 feet, west 100 feet, and that basically gives us a perfect square. Just disregard the part I had to square it off there at the end. But this square could be anywhere in the world unless we have a very specific point of beginning, or a point of beginning that we could reference to get to the first corner of the lot. So this is ultimately can be the most accurate method of legal description, the meets and bounds method, but it relies upon having a very accurate point of beginning, which at a certain point there weren't the Government Survey Corps monuments out fast enough because the country started expanding. That's why we switched to the government survey system as the primary method. And now today, with the modern developments that occur, that's where you'll have the lot and block method. But meets and bounds, that is where you need a specific point of beginning. So what type of listing allows a seller to sell their home on their own and not pay the broker a commission? What type of listing allows the seller to sell their home on their own and not pay the broker a commission? So there's one of these that should jump off the page at you, because this one is one I would really recommend you to study. And it's really knowing these. Well, this one is, we're missing an open listing on here. That's the one that is not One of the three. We'll write that in up here. Because an exclusive FSBO listing, that's made up. Now, like I said, we try not to include made-up stuff, but to simulate the actual real exam, we still do have stuff. And who knows, maybe it is at the same rate of the actual state exam, or maybe it is less. But that's why you want to be careful with practice questions. If you're going through it with an instructor like me, someone guiding you through this, I could help steer you through and point through all this stuff. But when you're going through this on your own, you could make a lot of misconnections and false associations if you don't know what you're doing. And that's why, again, be careful with the questions, but use them as a tool to see if you understand this here. Because if you see this and you say, oh, well, that's the three types I need to know. Open listing, which is multiple brokers can list it, so that's not exclusive. And that's probably left out here because it doesn't say anything specifically about it being exclusive to just one broker, because with an open listing, this technically could be true here, where a seller could sell the home on their own and not pay the broker a commission. The key thing here that might make it where it's just one broker is it says the broker, versus if it said not pay a broker, but your exam wouldn't be that nitpicky, and that's why open listing isn't an answer choice here, because open listing means you have multiple brokers, but still, if you sell it on your own, there's no commission due. The exclusive right of sale, that is the money listing as far as an agent goes. That's the one that you want, because this ensures that even if the seller does help find the buyer, or there's another broker that brings the buyer, that you're still entitled to a commission as long as you're within the terms of the contract, whatever other details and terms you could put in there. You could put all kinds of stuff in this, but ultimately, base level, exclusive right of sale, that's the one you want, because you don't want the seller to not have to pay you a commission, because that would be an exclusive agency listing. A net listing is also kind of a thing as well. It's not one of these three main types here. The net listing is going to be for the seller wants to get a certain amount, and then beyond that, the rest of it is going to be commission, which that could be in conjunction with it being exclusive right of sale or exclusive agency, or again, even an open listing. Because that just basically defines the level of exclusivity in your listing, whether it's an open listing, exclusive agency, or exclusive right of sale. But the reason why I said this one should jump off the screen, jump off the page at you, is because it's talking about selling on their own and not paying a commission. Key thing you want to remember, that is exclusive agency. However, again, if open listing word choice, that could be correct. The key wording I would say would be different, though, is not pay any broker a commission. Because if there's multiple brokers, right away, that's what tells you right away it's open listing if it's multiple brokers. When it's one broker, it's either going to be exclusive right of sale or exclusive agency. It's just the question of whether or not you get the commission in the event that the seller finds the buyer, which I would want. Because, yeah, maybe the seller did track him down, but maybe it was because of my marketing and my open houses and my signage and me helping get the word out and putting it all over the internet and all those things you do as a real estate professional. And so that's why most real estate transactions typically are going to be exclusive right of sale. But should the opportunity make sense for you, you have the ability to use exclusive agency as long as your broker would allow that. Next question, an option contract is classified as a or un. So option means one, typically. O for options, O for one. A lot of little things like that we do in the exam crayon videos. And there's one thing that should jump off right here as one, and that is unilateral. But all these other things are real things, so let's take a moment and explain what they are and why they're not this. So a apparel contract means oral or a spoken contract. Nothing in this question talks about it being an oral or spoken contract, so that's why option A is not the answer. Next, we have an executed contract, which is it's done, and the opposite of that is in progress for an executory. Nothing in the question here is talking about the status of the contract as to whether it's done or still in progress. So the one that really explains this the most, even if you're unsure, is unilateral, because it's only one party obligating. What an option contract is, let's talk about that, is where a seller wants to sell their property, so a buyer comes along and says, here, let me give you this offer to buy your house, and it's an option contract that says that as the buyer, I have the option to buy this property for this specified period of time. But if I don't want to buy the property, I don't have to buy it. But you as the seller have to sell it. So that's why it's considered unilateral, because only the one party is obligated. Only the seller is obligated to sell, and the buyer doesn't have to buy with an option contract. So those aren't very commonly used, because you could have a regular purchase and sale contract and still have inspection periods, financing contingencies, and even more that give you essentially loopholes or exit strategies to be able to get out of that contract should something come up in the inspection that you don't like, should the financing not be able to go through. A lot of times there are timelines and deadlines, though, to those clauses, which is why an option contract could be, if you want to have just an ultimate get out of jail free, get out of contract free type of situation. That's the option contract. So next question, what happens when a claim is paid to satisfy a judgment against a licensee from the Real Estate Recovery Fund? What happens when a claim is paid to satisfy a judgment against a licensee from the Real Estate Recovery Fund? So key word here, it always helps to start do some brainstorming before you even look at these answers, before you even read any of this stuff here. Looking at the question and saying, okay, what are we talking about here? The recovery fund. I remember the recovery fund, that's where, this is what you should be hopefully remembering here. I remember that's where they take money from your application fees and renewal fees and put it in this fund. And if it goes below $500,000, they add on extra fees. When it gets above $1 million, they take away the additional fees. And it's there to compensate for compensatory damages only for those who have been wronged by a licensee who is actively licensed at the time of doing the wrongdoing, committing whatever type of fraud, misrepresentation that led to fraud, and then they get sued. And that's what we're talking about with the judgment, because this is also a secondary purpose of this is for the Real Estate Recovery Fund to reimburse brokers who got sued for following an escrow disbursement order if they were holding escrow and they got an escrow disbursement order from the FREC instructing them how to disperse that escrow, and then they later got sued over that. That's where the Real Estate Recovery Fund will protect the broker in that situation. We're not talking about that, though, because we're talking about satisfying the judgment. So that was the first scenario where we're talking about somebody that held an active real estate license, committed some sort of misrepresentation and fraud against somebody, but they also got sued. They went to court, they got sued, they won, and they tried to collect from the real estate agent and they couldn't, and then they could go to the recovery fund to make the claim. And so now that we've done all that brainstorming, we can look at these answers and see which one of these line up. And it's actually asking here, what happens to the licensee? What happens when a claim against a licensee? So really, that's how I read this here, is what happens to a licensee, because one of the things that you want to remember is it's not permanent revocation, so you don't lose your license forever because of this. But something does happen, and this is close, mandatory suspension, but it's not for a definite time period. That's what's wrong with this one here, is that it says for 2 years. Next one, temporary suspension of the license until the recovery fund is reimbursed. I think that is our winner, because yes, the other one here is temporary revocation of the license, and revocation is not temporary, so that's why that one is wrong here. And so temporary suspension until the recovery fund is reimbursed. Final answer. And there it is. Because that is what happens to your license when a claim is made against you. Now, all that brainstorming that we did, even though I didn't mention that one specifically about the temporary suspension, which happened to actually be what the question was asking about specifically, of really when you kind of read through the answer choices here. But again, it helps getting your mind thinking about everything that you remember, which helps you not get confused by any made up or wrong information that's there, because you're helping jog all of those memories. So I have a time for a few more today. Let's move on to question number 9. Which of the following is not a requirement of a brokerage office? Which of the following is not a requirement of a brokerage office? So brokerage offices, do they have to have an entrance sign? Yeah, pretty sure they have to have an entrance sign. So we'll see here, but I'm pretty sure that's something they need to have. Next, having an enclosed room in a building of stationary construction. Yeah, that even sounds right out of the textbook, because it is. Because it's right out of the laws or the rules, the FREC rules, if this is a FREC rule, I believe. Registering with the DBPR. That pretty much, even if you don't remember that one specifically, think of the license, think of the application. That's all done with the DBPR. So yes, you are registered with the DBPR. But what about this? A working telephone line? That seems like something you would need to have, but believe it or not, it is not legally required. Because you don't need to have a phone. You do need to have an entrance sign. You do need to have an enclosed room of stationary construction. You do need to be registered with the DBPR. But phone, that's optional. That's up to you. That's up to you about running your business if you want to have a phone, which personally I would recommend it, but, you know, it's not required. When the tenant vacates the property and the landlord is not going to make a claim on the security deposit, when is the landlord required to return the deposit? We've got 3 days, 10 days, 5 days, and 15 days. And I wish I had more tricks to share with you. And I'll be honest with you, if you're going to go through these exam prep materials looking for these tricks, I think the best one, I'll go ahead and give it away right now, is whether it's business or calendar days. But a lot of times, as you can see on the exam here, is it doesn't even care about that. A lot of times it's just based on the number. And now it typically will say, that is one thing I will say this question is probably not doing the best job of here, is it might, but actually no, because if it just says it like this here, it's assumed to be calendar days. If it did say business days, because you could absolutely see business day options on here on the exam, but I would almost put money on it. I would put money on it. I don't know, that might be illegal for me to say that. So theoretically, I'd put money on it that you would not see options on your exam with the same number, with one being calendar days and one being business days. So don't worry about whether it's calendar or business days, but as far as it goes in terms of remembering these other dates, repetition is the best thing that I could really share with you on these here, because it's really hard to make tricks when these same numbers can be reused and they're kind of arbitrary for in the grand scheme of things. They're not once you remember them enough, but they just are those number of days because they are those number of days. And especially if you do any sort of property management, this does come up in the real world. So this is something actually very important in the real world when it comes to security deposits and being able to impose a claim, because that's where it's 30 days that you have to notify a tenant if you intend to impose a claim. But if you do intend to just return the money, that's going to be within 15 days. So what do you say? Should we do one more today? Should we do one more question? Yeah, we'll do one more. So one more question from the question simulator. What's it going to be? An interest in real property that can be measured by the lifetime of an individual is a type of... Now you might be thinking life estate. But as you could see on here, life estate is not an option. This, again, is where we have to find the best answer. And this is where a lot of people get confused when it comes to the property rights chapters, is understanding that these are all kind of nesting categories. And so a life estate absolutely is a type of one of these here. Let's break down what these are here. Now, this one, I really like. That's the one that jumps off the page, honestly. I think that's going to be our answer here. But I want to start with this one because this is really the most broad one. And that's why it's almost a giveaway that it's here, is because it basically any type of ownership estate, which when we're talking about an interest that can be measured by a person's lifetime, I guess it doesn't really give away that we're talking about ownership here. But there's not any sort of leases that are based on a person's lifetime. Not like a standard lease, at least. I'm sure some attorney somewhere for enough money could cook that up, but that's not a typical standard thing. Not something taught in your pre-licensing course. And again, remember, not in the course, not on your exam. And one thing I could also point out here, if you're familiar with the terms, is these are the same thing. These both mean non-ownership, or leasing. So as I said, there's not any leases that are measured in a lifetime, at least not a standard one. And an estate for years is based on years. It's a non-freehold. So really there's only one on here that relates to ownership. And so if you can remember that life estates are estates of ownership, and also remember that freehold means just any type of ownership estate, this one's actually a really simple one right here. But it is a lot of terminology in that section. And that's what I really like about the Exam Cram workbook here that goes along with these videos, is there's a lot of bolded terms and information that you can see in here. And with this, we really try to make it as simple as possible. That's how we get this down to only about 100 pages or so. 20% of the length is because we cut out a lot of the extra information. It's not necessarily the best grammar, but it's not meant to be the best grammar. It's not meant to be anything that's going to help you learn the information. So it's kind of the prerequisite is having taken the course, having learned that information. Now, you might not remember it all, but this will help you remember the key points that are most important for the exam. And then again, you use tools like the question simulator to be able to test yourself. So let's do one more. We'll make it an even 12 questions for today. Then I've got to sign off for today's broadcast. So last one. Brian Fowler is opening up a real estate brokerage. He is registered under the trade name Fast Realty. He has one sales associate, Betty Maples. Which information is not required to be included on the entrance sign? So on a brokerage entrance sign, there must be the name of the broker, and above that, really, the name of the brokerage. So you'd have the name of the brokerage, the name of the broker, and then the words licensed real estate broker. Now, in theory, you could put Betty Maples on there as sales associate, but she is not required to be on there. That would be the appropriate way to put her on the door sign if she was going to go on the door sign, but she is ultimately not required to be on there. But you do need to have the name of the brokerage, the name of the broker, and the words licensed real estate broker. So I hope these questions have helped you better gauge your preparedness for the exam. You know, if you got 12 out of 12 today and everything I was saying was making sense to you and you're feeling confident, then go in there and go take that state exam. Now, I know this was only 12 questions, but again, if you're going 12 for 12, this is a lot of information. And again, if all the extra detail I provided, again, made sense, it's stuff that you remember, you probably are pretty ready. But if there was anything eye-opening today, if there was anything like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense, or, oh, I see, that's why it is, then that's why I would really recommend those exam prep materials, passfirsttry.com. You can go right in, it'll just take you right to the page on the Tampa School of Real Estate website where we've got all the Pass First Try information, the guide, as well as the ability to purchase either the 12 months access for $197 or get it with TSRE Plus for just $47 per month. And either option includes the workbook with free shipping to your door in the continental United States. And with that, you're not just getting the workbook and the question simulator. The workbook, it doesn't even really go specifically with the question simulator, but what it does actually have, it does kind of go with the question simulator, is you've got these QR codes here for the different tools. So to go to the audio review, you could scan right there. To go to the question simulator, you could scan right there for that unit. To go to the exam cram videos for this unit, you could scan right there. Even the exam strategies, we've got the QR code right here at the beginning to scan into that, to scan into the secrets of the exam. So it makes it very interactive, that workbook, because the question simulator is a small piece of this puzzle right here. That's this little bit right down here on the iPad at all these. The exam cram videos, the weekend prep classes, it's also known because this was basically the recording of a live prep class, which we don't even do live prep classes anymore because the videos are so much more beneficial, because it's just so much information to try to cram into 2 days. It's impossible. So what works a lot better than that is the spaced repetition that you could drill anytime, anywhere, including with the TSRE app that we were actually working directly out of today here live on the air, just to really kind of show you how well that app does work. The secrets of the exam, again, that's like your instruction manual of how to use all these exam prep tools, but also how to understand, how to use this exam, really. How to use the system, how to use the time to your most benefit, how to use your own skills, how to hone those. And so that's all in the secrets of the exam. The audio review, that's only 5 hours. The exam cram videos are about 14 hours of videos, and they're all broken up into individual videos, so you could search for whatever topics you need, or you could watch the whole thing nonstop like you are doing it at a live in-person cram event. But the audio review, this is only 5 hours, so it is less detailed, but it's easy to cram in over and over and over and over again. It helps build a strong foundation. So all of these tools work the best when they're utilized together. And that's why, again, the TSRE Plus is your best option, because this exam can be passed in 1 month. And so after that month, you could then switch your membership to a post-licensing course. So you can go ahead and do your post-licensing as soon as you pass. Or you could also switch it to Real Estate Pro University to get trainings like working with for sale by owners, how renters become buyers, holding open houses, working with all the different FAR bar as is, sale contract, the listing agreement, the buyer brokerage agreement, key details you need to know to actually make money with your real estate license. We have that all available. And the Select program allows you to select whatever course program it is that you need. So that's TSRE Plus Select, $47 a month right now. Or again, you could purchase the whole thing with 12 months access for $197, which if you're just doing this super part-time, that might make more sense to you. But if you're serious about this, even if you are doing this part-time, if not a month, maybe 2 or 3 months. If it is going to take you more than 4 months, again, maybe that's where you consider doing the $197 to get the 12 months access through TampaSchoolRealEstate.com for all of this. But whatever makes the most sense for you, we want to give you options. So if you have questions about this, if you want to make sense of this more, if you've already taken the exam and you're struggling to get through it, you're not alone. Call us up. Look, even if you're not a student of ours yet, reach out to our advisors. If you have the exam result sheet from your state exam, look, the state exam is tough. It's got a 50% pass rate, and that's been the case. It's been 50%, 51%, 49% in that range as long as I've seen the monthly numbers that they would put out for this for years. Almost to the point where I believe that's where they standardize and hold it at that number there. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just a tough exam. And it's not even really that it's a tough exam. It's an exam that's tough if you don't know the information from the pre-licensing course. If you don't know those basics of the pre-licensing course, all the different stuff we were talking about today, you could be an expert in real estate, but that's why, you might be somebody that already has a license and you tuned in today just to see if you think you could pass. And there might have been a few questions that stumped you. Because I know, as a real estate instructor, as well as a real estate broker who basically lives, eats, and breathes real estate, very often there's a question in this question simulator where I kind of scratch my head. I'm like, yeah, that is a good question. I wonder, let's see, I think I remember that correctly. Because there's a lot to know, and it doesn't always come up in the day-to-day world. So don't let it stress you out. Understand that this is just a checkpoint in the process of your real estate career, and it absolutely can be overcome. If there's any way we can help you with that, the phone number here is 813-333-2676. Again, that's 813-333-2676. It's about all the time that we've got for today. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday for State of Real Estate. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you on Friday. Are you studying for your Florida real estate exam? If you are, you need to check out our Pass First Try strategy. You're going to love this. It's 4 steps that we break down the process to study for your Florida real estate exam. So you're set up to pass your Florida real estate exam, because that's what you're studying for, right? To pass your exam. It's 4 steps. Number 1, you learn the information. You've got to learn this to be able to pass the exam, but it doesn't stop at learning. Step 2, you've got to reinforce the basic, simple, key concepts. As you learn this information, keep reviewing the simple things. You don't need to know everything, but you got to review these basic key concepts. Step 3, you've got to test your knowledge. The exam's going to test your knowledge, so if you don't test your knowledge in advance, you won't find out if you know what you think you know until you take the exam. And then step 4 is be confident and prepared, because even if you know this material, you need to be confident that you know the material. Check out the full strategy at PassFirstTry.com. That's PassFirstTry.com.